y'all see that? Slideshow. There we go. Cool. How's everybody doing? We good? I just said a second ago, if you can turn your camera on, I'd love it if you could. Just that it's just helpful for me to be able to see faces and know if what I'm saying is resonating and making sense. But I'm excited about being with y'all today. So today's topic is how to invest in your business with God's capital. This won't be like a strategy session on how to start a business, how to grow a business. I want to talk about some real basic principles that I've learned over the years and really put those on the table for y'all. And then towards the end of the presentation, I got something special just for everybody that's here on the in the workshop. And so we'll get to that when we get to the end of the presentation. But yeah, I'm excited about this. I've been rocking with Legacy for over a decade now. So I remember when I first went, I was like, it's like I kept calling it a family reunion for me because I was a hip hop head, and I was like, these are all my people here in Chicago, and I get to you start building these relationships and connecting with people, and you see them year after year. So I'm really I don't know if it's your first time at Legacy, if this is something that if you're a seasoned vet like me, or if it's your first time, but either way, what Brian and his team have created and what the Lord's given them the grace to cultivate has been a blessing for a lot of people. So I'm excited that we get to keep the wheels going even in the midst of a pandemic and leverage technology to do stuff like this. So the topic for today is how to invest in your business with God's capital. All right, that might sound funny. We will unpack that and I'll explain what it means. But there we go. All right, so I know that there are basically probably two types of people on the call tonight. Individuals without a business currently, but have entrepreneurial aspirations, or individuals who own a business and are looking to grow as an entrepreneur. That's probably the two buckets. If you don't feel like you fall into one of those, you probably lean more heavily into one than the other at the least. But so I've created this whole presentation with these two people in mind. And my goal for this session is to basically do two things. Is to show you that the only way for the Christian with entrepreneurial ambitions to truly be successful is to make investments with the right form of capital. Normally we think about capital and we think money, but there are actually more forms of capital that the Bible speaks to. And so when I learned this, it was really a game changer for me because it helped me start seeing the paradigm of how broad the scriptures were and what God's what his purposes were in me as an individual and with me with entrepreneurial ambition. It helped just broaden the scope and help me really find my lane in regards to what I was how I was looking to leverage my gifts and my passions. So and the second thing is that the only way to make investments with the right form of capital is to understand what's called oikonomics. That's a funny word, and most of us probably have not heard of that. There's a guy by the name of Mike Breen. I borrowed that term from him. He has a whole book called Oikonomics. So, I would highly recommend everybody read it. But I love the content of his book because he has some really strategic and beautiful things about what he does in regards to thinking about how we live life in a holistic way and not compartmentalize things. So that's my goal for this session, these two things. And so who am I? I'm Josh Miles. This is my family. It's my wife, Camille. We got 4 kids. And my oldest is 8. My youngest is 3. So we crammed a lot of kids into a very short amount of time. No more though. We're done. And so, but this is us over the years. The one picture on the left is the most recent one at Christmas. And so, yeah, that's my squad. And so love them to death. The reason why I do what I do is to serve them, primarily. And, of course, serving the Lord, but they are my why, as some people like to say. So, my journey, I'm just share a little bit with y'all about my journey as an entrepreneur. So in 2012, I was working at Wells Fargo in Phoenix, Arizona. I was working on the corporate side. I worked in the I was in the vendor relationship management space. And so I was 27. They had a seminar, a luncheon where they talked about your 401k plan and really help people understand it. I had been throwing money at it for a few years, knew it was growing a lot because I started investing when the economy tanked in 2008, but had no idea like how it was making money, didn't understand how the whole process worked. So I went into the session. I walk in the room, was a couple minutes late, walked down the side wall and sat in the back. And this guy is sitting in the front of the room. He's talking about 401ks and he's just explaining stuff. And he just dropped this nugget in there and almost like kept it moving. But he said, when you're 59 and a half, you can take the money out and you can go retire. And like when he said it, it was like somebody pulled the emergency brake on me. I was like, whoa, I'm 27. I got to live a whole nother life plus some. And literally that was like the day that I realized like, man, I don't think I want to keep coming to the cubicle farm and showing up in corporate America for that long. I had already started feeling kind of restless. Like, man, I'm not really using my gifts. They weren't letting me use my creativity, my leadership. And so that was kind of the turning point for me to start saying, okay, what's next? And it took me on a 2-year journey, honestly. For the next 2 years, I spent just writing down ideas all the time. I was always trying to run different business ideas by people. Trying to figure out like, man, how do I build something that I can, that's mine and that I can take and leverage for the right things. And so at the time, it's 2015, I started a company called Jaywalking. It basically was an e-commerce site for people that sold Air Jordans. I was the middle guy. I was just trying to connect buyers and sellers. And I had the online platform where they can go and sell their shoes, kind of like an eBay or Amazon or something like that. And so I launched this company, I actually pulled $50,000 out of my 401k and dumped it all into this thing and spent 18 months working with a development company to build me a whole online platform, big infrastructure, the whole nine. And then I pushed play and launched and crickets. Like nothing happened. And so this is a picture on the right of me at a sneaker event. There's an event called SneakerCon. I was there as a vendor. This is one of my first ones. I had like a little small inventory of shoes where I'm like, let me at least get people to the table, and start trying to talk to them. And so this is what I was doing. And so I did that for probably about 6 months and saw very little movement. I was running Facebook ads and getting people to sign up on the platform and generated probably about 11,000 leads in about 6 months, but didn't really know how to do anything with them. And so I was at it was probably 6 to 8 months later after I had gotten this going. I'm in LA at the same event, SneakerCon, because they travel all over the world. I'm in LA at the BET Awards, and SneakerCon had a 2-day event. And so I'm one of the vendors there at the event, and I'm standing next to this company. And this guy has like shoes stacked 8 feet high, hundreds of shoes. I mean, he was like the real deal, sneaker collector. He's selling these things. And I saw this kid, this little white kid. He walks up to his table. They start talking back and forth. I mean, the guy's literally right to my left. They're talking back and forth. Kid has a backpack on his chest. He unzips the backpack, pulls out a stack of $100 bills, and paid $6,000 for a pair of shoes. $6,000, kind of 60 hundreds. And the exchange is done. And so I'm watching this, and I'm like, that's tragic. And the thing that was tragic was not how much he paid for the shoes. The thing that was, even though that's tragic too. The thing that was tragic was that the guy didn't get his contact info. I was like, you got this dude just spent $6,000 with you and you didn't get any contact information? Like, what's up? And it hit me that I was surrounded by a bunch of business owners who didn't know how to generate leads. And so I transitioned my business and I came up with this thing called Jordan Giveaways. I changed up my whole platform and how I showed up at these events. I started going to events and I get the hottest pair of Jordans that had just released a week or two before, and I'd give them away at the event, and you could enter the giveaway by just giving me your name, email, and phone number. So I started building this list, and then I went back to all the vendors at the event and said, hey, I've got 20,000 people in my database. If you run a giveaway through me for $1,500 for a week, I'll push your brand out to all these people, and everybody that signs up for your giveaway, you can keep the contact information once it's done. And so that was kind of like my transition into this marketing space where I was learning how to market. And I mean, I was going to these events in a weekend, I'd get 4,000 emails, that type of thing. I was doing that, had a business partner that lacked some integrity and some different things like that. So I got out of the business and moved over to real estate. Moved into real estate, was supposed to be, I don't know if y'all know what wholesaling is, but you know, I got into it to do wholesaling and decided like I can make a lot more money flipping houses. Well, the problem was when you flip houses, it's a lot more risky. And in 2018, lost a gang of money, like hundreds of thousands of dollars flipping houses that on deals that went bad. I had a contract to steal 20 grand from me. It was like all kind of crazy stuff was going on. And literally just like saw my life kind of go from like the ambitious guy, because I left my job in 2017. And it was like shortly after I left my job, less than a year, like my life was like 180, you know, financial turmoil. And it was just nuts. But the thing that was always consistent was my ability to market and my passion for it. And I remember the first time I was talking to one of my friends and I was explaining a marketing strategy to her and helping her like understand the moves that the moves that she should make. And I realized how excited I got when the light bulbs came on for her. And I was like, dang, I think I like helping people be successful more than I actually want to succeed myself. And I think that was the missing piece for me. I just wanted to really serve other entrepreneurs and help them grow businesses. And so now what I do is I own a company called One Stadium or Peak Funnel Consulting, same company, different name. One's a DBA. But One Stadium is the space that I function in where I'm able to equip entrepreneurs with resources in order to help them grow their businesses. And Peak Funnel Consulting is the brand name that I'm under when companies want to pay me to basically take over their marketing strategy for them. And me and my team will come in, we'll reframe everything, you know, kind of tear it apart, put it back together, and help them scale their businesses that way. So one's a lot more hands-on. The other one is more resource-based. But this is what I do now. I own a digital marketing agency, and I love helping entrepreneurs. I love helping people who have vision but may not know the steps that they need to take in order to scale it, grow it, start it, whatever it may be. I love helping them be successful and really have a roadmap for where they should go and what they should do. So, but I'm a Christian as well, obviously, and this is really my passion. I was telling somebody as I was preparing for this, I was like, man, I feel like I'm in my sweet spot. I'm able to talk about the Lord and talk about business. This is like perfect. And so this is just, I get really, really excited about marketing. I get even more excited about talking about Jesus in the context of marketing and entrepreneurship. So this is that's a little bit about me and kind of my story and how I got here. So what is oikonomics? I used this word earlier. The word economy that most of us are familiar with comes from the word oikos, which just means household. And then these are two Greek words, oikos and nomos. Nomos is just custom or law. So basically how a household is run. The laws that govern a household, that's what an economy is. That's the original meaning of the word. We use it more broadly now. Like the economy, we talk kind of globally, nationally, internationally, that kind of thing. But the original word was like, man, how do we govern a group of people that live in proximity with one another, right? That's what an economy is. Well, economics is how we transfer wealth, assets, and resources, right? If you've taken an economics class, you know that it's a lot about supply and demand, how stuff moves, trade, all these different things that makes up economics. So real quick, I'd really be curious to know who owns a business currently, or like, Brian, can we toss that poll question up? Can I control that? Is that you? There we go. So yeah, let me know if you currently own a business. I'd really like to know where you guys are at before I get too deep into the economics piece, and where y'all are at. Okay. Cool. Okay, so a lot of people are interested. It looks like the majority of people are interested in starting a business but haven't yet. Okay. Okay, excellent. And somebody does have one. Excellent. Cool. So this is great. This is great. Love it, love it, love it. Appreciate y'all giving feedback. So this is what economics is. It's an economy, and we're talking about economics. So economics is literally, there we go. It's how do we invest and manage the economy of our household, right? So we take the oikos or the household. That's a Greek word for just a household. And then back then, the oikos would be more than just like my wife and kids. It would be the people that worked for me. So my employees, or in the Bible times, servants, slaves. It would be my neighbors that I was in close proximity with and spent a lot of time with. So my good friends, it would be my extended family. They would all be considered a part of the oikos, right? So the question on the table is, how do we actually invest and manage the economy of our household? When all of these relationships come together, how do we build one another up and invest into one another in the right ways? The Bible talks about Jesus as a king, and he talks about the kingdom all the time in the scriptures. There's a certain value system that the kingdom functions by, that Jesus says, like, my kingdom is not of this world, right? There's a whole, what he means is there's a value system that y'all live by, but I don't function by that value system at the core. Yeah, I'm living in the midst of it, but that's not the thing that really drives me, right? Their economics is, what does it look like for us to navigate and be citizens of God's kingdom, but also have a way that we function as a means of making investment with one another. And so something that I think is brilliant is Mike Breen says that Jesus is the most brilliant economist to ever live, because he knew exactly how to invest into his household. I have 4 kids, and sometimes it's difficult trying to navigate, like, man, what do you need right now? One of my kids is crying, and I'm like, I don't, my knee-jerk reaction is to say stop crying, but then at the same time I'm like, but do you need something? Jesus doesn't have that problem. Jesus is very very capable of investing into his household, and he knows exactly what they need when they need it, and we see him execute on that during his lifetime, right? Jesus is always, somebody comes and asks a question, and we read the question in the scriptures and we're like, dang, how is he going to answer? And Jesus is like, I hear you, but let me ask you. And he asks them a question and he'll shut the whole thing down, right? He knows exactly how to navigate all these different spaces where he's interacting with people. How do I invest? How do I encourage? When do I rebuke? All these different things. Jesus knows how to invest into his household. And so economics is how do all these things come to play when it comes to investment with a kingdom mindset. All right. So the importance of investing. If you have Bibles, we're going to read Matthew 25. So I would encourage you to have scriptures on you, because we're going to probably we will look at a few different scriptures. And if somebody wants to read this, that'd be awesome, just to get some engagement. If not, I can. But if somebody wants to, I'm more than willing to let somebody volunteer. Nobody? Okay, cool. Just take yourself off mute and you can go ahead and jump in.
I can read it. I'm a little nasally though, but yeah. Okay, so Matthew 25:14. Again, it will be like, and I'm from NLT, by the way. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one, he gave 5 talents of money, to another 2 talents, and to another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received the 5 talents went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. So also the one with 2 talents gained 2 more. But the man who had received the 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received the 5 talents brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with 2 talents also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 talents. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in trust of many more. Come and share your master's happiness. Then the man who had received the 1 talent came. Master, he said, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your talents in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gathered where I have not scattered seed. Well then, you should have put money on deposit with the banker so that when I return, I would have received it back with interest. Take the talent from him and give it to another who has 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more, and he who with abundance, I'm sorry. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will be given abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him and thrown that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where he'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Cool. Thank you. So Jesus is, if we're going to exegete that, Jesus is obviously trying to show, he has a spiritual truth that he's trying to communicate. But Jesus borrows a metaphor of just how money works, right? And he uses it to show the spiritual reality that he's talking about. But in it, we see the importance of investing. And one of the things that we see is that to not invest what God has given us is considered wickedness. Right? It's not like, oh, God, you gave me this and I just sat on it. It's cool. He comes back to the man that didn't go and invest it and do anything with it at all and says, what are you doing? He's like, the least you could have done was go and invest it at the bank and I got just a little bit of interest on it. And so the point is that like you have these other two guys who he gave them all different amounts, and the other two guys both went and double what he gave them. The one person says, I only had one. I didn't want to risk losing it all, and so I didn't do anything with it. If you read the passage, all the other two guys, they were okay risking it all for the purpose of him getting a return, right? And so trying to play it safe from Jesus's perspective wasn't an option on the table. He says, I've given you something. I need you to go and use it and invest it so that I get a return on what I've given you. All right. And notice that it wasn't even for their benefit. They weren't getting the return. He was getting the return based on what he had given them. All right. So how do we ensure that Jesus gets a return on the investment that he's entrusted to us is the question. All right. To answer that, we got to understand a couple of things. That two necessary parts of any economy, I don't care where you go in the world, there are two things that are definitely true about any country, any place that has a quote unquote economy. Even places that don't have like an instituted government still have these two pieces if they have people that are engaging in any type of transaction or business together. It's capital and currency. All right. So capital is just the resources or assets in our possession that we can use to invest. Right. So somebody might say, I have financial capital. Right. That means that I have something that's financial in my hand that I can actually go use to invest. All right. But every piece of capital is represented by what's called currency. Y'all following me? So currency is just like, what do we use? Right. Every different countries have different pieces of currency. So we have what exchange rates. So if I go to China, I'm not going to use a dollar bill. They don't really accept those. So I have to go and exchange the dollar bill for whatever type of currency that they use in order for me to engage in trading and investing capital in that country. Y'all with me? I kind of see like head nods. Just okay, cool. So capital is represented by currency. In the US, financial capital is represented by dollars and cents. Right? I can't, like, if I go to the store and say, hey, I got this Monopoly dollar, I want a Twix, they're gonna be like, we don't accept that here. That's not a legitimate form of currency based on the financial capital system that's in place. All right, so capital is represented by currency. That's very important to know. So the question was, how do we make sure that Jesus gets a return on his investment? We normally think of capital in one way, financial. That's normally the only way that we think about capital. And I remember the first time I realized this and was reading through this book, it talked about capital in 5 different ways. And the Bible presents it in 5 different ways. And so we'll look at each. We have financial capital, we have physical capital, we have intellectual capital, relational capital, and spiritual capital. All right, y'all should write those down. The financial, physical, intellectual, relational, and spiritual. Looks like, let me see.
Can you repeat that, please?
Yep. Financial, physical, intellectual, relational, and spiritual. And y'all should be able to see my screen too, just in case. So just in case, I know you can swipe and whatnot. So sometimes if it's not on the screen, you're just looking at me. So just so y'all know. So somebody said, you talking about spiritual gifts or skills, experiences, ideas we have. Yeah. So I'm not talking about spiritual gifts, not spiritual gifts. I think that spiritual gifts are kind of like that. Yeah, that's not in the same lane that I'm speaking about these. So we're talking about things that you go. I mean, I think spiritual gifts are connected to this, but we're talking about these kind of separate from spiritual gifts themselves, because I don't think this category or this framework that I'm putting on the table, I don't think that really fits spiritual gifts holistically. Does that make sense? I hope that's helpful. All right. But yeah, financial, physical, intellectual, relational, and spiritual. So the question is, what if these are the 5 categories of capital? How are they expressed? How can I actually go and invest with them? Which means that I need some form of currency in each, right? Well, here's the currency for each. Financial capital is dollars and cents. Physical capital is my time, my health, and my energy, right? So if I'm always tired, I'm physically not able to give as much as I could if I had energy, right? So my physical capital is just low based on the fact that my currency for it is minimal. All right. If we really can't affect time, everybody gets 24 hours in a day, but how I spend my time is different. Everybody's quarantined right now and staying home. How I spend my time probably went up a little bit in regards to my physical capital. I probably have more time to do some things than I used to, because I'm forced to stay home and not go anywhere. So all the stuff that I used to not have time for is probably like not a thing right now. I probably have more than enough time to get some things done. All right, intellectual capital. If you're in the music industry, people will say like intellectual property rights. If I write a song and then somebody else comes along and says, nah, I wrote that song, we'll probably go to court over what's called intellectual property rights. Who owns this, right? The only reason that's a thing is because there's such thing as intellectual capital. So the currency for intellectual capital is my creativity, my ideas, or my knowledge and what I know. Okay, so when I bring an idea to the table that's brand new, I'm exercising my intellectual capital by doing that. All right. Relational capital is expressed in my family and friends. How many of us is like, man, I need $10 real quick. I don't have my card on me and I don't have any cash. And you turn to your friend and say, can I borrow $10? I'll get it back to you later. Right. Well, now I'm leaning into my relational capital. I'm using the equity of my relational capital. Equity is, the what I have to pull from, right? The reserve, what I can use as leverage. My family and friends are my relational capital, and spiritual capital is expressed in wisdom and power. I don't mean power in regards to like power hungry or power as we might think of it in the world. I just mean the type of power that Jesus speaks of in Acts, right? He tells his disciples, hey, go to Jerusalem and like you'll receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you. There's just a reality that when we are in alignment with what God has called us to and God is moving in and through us, that we see stuff happen. And I think biblically we see that when Jesus taught his disciples to pray, let your kingdom come and your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. There's just some things when it's like, man, this feels heavenly because God is in the mix and only God is orchestrating this the way it is. So I mean power in that sense. And then just wisdom where we have the wisdom to make good decisions, right? We see that with Solomon. He was the wisest man other than Christ to ever live. And he was able to navigate situations that would have stumped most people. He had the wisdom to actually make sound decisions, right? He's leaning into the spiritual capital that God had entrusted to him. All right. So these are the 5 forms of capital and the 5 ways that they are expressed, or the 5 things that we can leverage to build our capital. Okay. When one of these things is low, our capital in these spaces is not high. When one of them is high, then our capital is normally high, right? My financial capital is low if I don't have any money in the bank. If I have $1 million in the bank, my financial capital is high, all right? So I just want y'all to I want to make this crystal clear, because when you understand this piece, everything else is going to make a lot more sense as we keep going, all right? So kingdom economics, those are the 5 types of capital, all right? So we're going to read a fairly, I say tricky passage. This is, I'm not going to try and explain what the spiritual meaning of this passage is. I will grab a couple principles though, and we're going to look at how we see these 5 types of capital expressed in this passage. All right, so I'm going to just read this one for us. Luke chapter 16, verses 1 to 13. I'll let y'all get there in a second, and then I'll read. All right, he says, he also said to his disciples, there was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was wasting his possessions. And he called him and said to him, what is this that I hear about you? Turn in the account of your management, for you can no longer be manager. And the manager said to himself, what shall I do, since my master is taking the management away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I am ashamed to beg. I have decided what to do, so that when I am removed from management, people may receive me into their houses. So summoning his master's debtors one by one, he said to the first, how much do you owe your master? He said, 100 measures of oil. He said to him, take your bill and sit down quickly and write 50. Then he said to another, how much do you owe? He said, 100 measures of wheat. He said to him, take your bill and write 80. The master commended the dishonest manager for his shrewdness. For the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light. And I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of unrighteous wealth, so that when it fails, they may receive you into the eternal dwellings. One who is faithful in a very little is also faithful in much, and one who is dishonest in a very little is also dishonest in much. If then you have not been faithful in the unrighteous wealth, who will entrust to you the true riches? And if you have not been faithful in that which is another's, who will give you that which is your own? No servant can serve 2 masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. All right, there's a lot going on right there. Long story short, Jesus tells a parable about a guy who owned a bunch of stuff and he had somebody managing it. Word got to him that, listen, this man is wasting your possessions. He goes to him and he says, you're fired. The guy says, dang, if I'm fired, I can't come back to work tomorrow. What am I going to do? He says, I'm going to go to some of his people that owe him money, and I'm going to, in order to build relational capital with them, I'm going to scratch off what they owe on the bill, deduct it, they'll like me for it, and then when I get fired, I can go back to them and say, hey, he just fired me, I need somewhere to stay. And they'll be like, well, shoot, you just cut me a deal, you can stay here with me, right? The amount of money that he gave them as a deduction was about a year and a half's worth of wages total, all right? It's interesting because Jesus in the parable says that when the manager finds out what he didn't say, I can't believe you cheated me. What he says was, it says the manager commended him for his shrewdness, right? Like, you think that somebody like got over on you, you'd be like, nah, homie, like that's not gonna fly, right? That's not what Jesus says, that's not what the manager does. He actually says like, dang, you got me, right? And he commends him. And then he goes on to say that Jesus is proving the point that, listen, you can't serve God and money. We see 5 forms of capital being expressed here. The first is that if you love money, right? The first is the financial capital. We see that there can be a love of money. That's the first thing that Jesus says at the end of the passage. You can actually love money, right? So you can be so invested into your financial capital that I'm always chasing money, trying to increase my currency in order to increase my financial capital. That's possible, right? Paul says like the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. So he's like, don't love money, right? So that's one thing that somebody can love. They can love money in a way that they're always trying to grow their financial capital. He also says you can serve God though. In verse 13, you can actually serve God, and like out of the two, you choose God over the money. And so you're more invested in your spiritual capital growing because you want to serve God, not the money primarily. Okay. We see physical capital being exercised here. In verse 3, the manager, once he finds out that he's going to lose his job, he says, what am I going to do? My master is going to fire me, but I'm not strong enough to dig. Basically, I'm not strong enough to go do manual labor, right? I can manage stuff as a manager, but when you start asking me to be the one putting my hand in the plow, I'm not capable. So he recognizes his lack of physical capital, okay? But he recognizes his lack of physical capital, and he leverages a form of physical capital that compensates for the lack of strength that he has. He says, I still got a couple hours till I get off. Since today's my last day, let me go holler at some people that owe him money and consolidate this debt. And so he goes to the two people and he says, take your bill, scratch it out. And so he leverages his physical capital, right? The fact that he had time just to be shrewd and do what he did. All right. But he also leverages his intellectual capital. The fact that he came up with the idea is him being creative. And he's saying, man, I'm going to use this database of creativity that I have and come up with a solution. I got a set amount of time. I got to get this done. What do? I know what I can do. I can consolidate this debt. He uses his physical capital and his intellectual capital. He spends it, right? Spending money. He spends his physical intellectual capital, it's not money in this case, to build relational capital. He says, I need to make friends with some people real fast so I have somewhere to stay tonight. So in verse 4, he says, I'm going to go to the people that owe him money, change their bill, and guess what? They're going to receive me into their houses. And then in verses 8 and 9, the master, when he sees what he did, he even says, like, hey, the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of light. I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of unrighteous wealth, or just make friends for yourself by means of spending money, so that when it fails, they may receive you into their eternal dwellings. He basically just affirms what he did. He says, like, man, you went and bought friends. You went and used my money to buy friends for yourself. That's actually pretty genius. That's the point of what he's trying to say right there. I want to make it crystal clear. Jesus is not affirming him in what he did. He's using this to prove another point. But I think we see what principle here, that relational capital is more valuable than money, right? He's building friendships and using money as the leverage to do so, even though it's not his own. All right. Do y'all see that? Anybody have questions on that at all? I don't want to move too quick past that if y'all have questions. Like thumbs up. That makes sense. Okay, cool. I'm gonna keep it moving. Feel free to jump in if you have questions. So we see those 5 different forms of capital kind of expressed in that passage. How do we value various forms of capital for the purpose of investing it wisely, right? If money is not the only form of capital that's available to me, if what I know and my creativity is like capital that God's given me, and I can invest it, like, how do I know what the priority is, right? I think this is the priority that we see in scripture when it comes to the 5 different forms of capital from top to bottom. Number 1 is spiritual capital, right? Jesus says, like, what does it profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul? Like, if you had everything else, the most friends, the most time, the most creativity, and the most money, what would it profit you if you lost your soul, right? Jesus is setting a precedent that the most important thing you can do is take care of your soul, right? So the most important form of capital that we see is spiritual. Second, I would say, is relational, right? Relationships. You can lack in time, energy, creativity, and money. If you have good relationships, you can make it. I remember the first time somebody told me, when somebody said people aren't poor because they don't have money, people are poor because they lack resources. And I was like, dang, like, you know, somebody that has resources, even if you are broke, you can still make it, right? If you know the right people with resources. Relationships are important. I think it speaks to what God has made and crafted in his church, right? Jesus didn't save us just for us to go be young renegades and live life by ourselves. Jesus did what he did in order to place us into community because he has a premium on relationships, primarily us with him, but not just us with him individually. There's a vertical relationship with him individually, but horizontally as well, as we all are vertically focused to God himself. All right. So there's a relational form of capital that's important. Physical capital, time, how I spend my time. I think you see this in the Old Testament when God, like, just, he has this balance of work and rest. Like, listen, y'all work 6 days a week. take time off, like learn to shut it down, right? How I spend my time and energy, the importance of my health. All of those things are important in God's economy. Physical capital is important. Intellectual capital, my creativity that I bring to the table. That's important, right? Those are things that God has gifted me with. So going back to the spiritual gifts question, it's not necessarily a spiritual gift, right? But God is still gifting me with the ability to think and to think outside the box sometimes. I tell my kids, they're like, Daddy, we need help with, and I'm like, well, have you exhausted your resources? Have you tried? Have you talked to your siblings? And I'm always trying to push them and challenging them to think outside the box. Don't just lean into asking for help first. Look at what's available to you and leverage it. Learn how to be creative with what you have. And I mean, it's funny watching kids do that too, because they'll start thinking of all kind of stuff that I wouldn't even thought of. And it's like, man, they're exercising intellectual capital. Their brains are going and saying, okay, cool, the screwdriver doesn't work because it's too big for the screw that I'm trying to unscrew. What else can I use? My son's got a little paper clip once. And he's trying to like get it. And I'm like, see, that's not going to work, but he's at least trying. He's leveraging his intellectual capital. And then lastly, financial capital. Normally financial capital gets placed at the top, right? Hip hop, it's all over hip hop. Like, I got 6 jobs. I don't get tired. It's just like, what? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you just always chasing money. Money is like the main focus of everything that we do in the culture. Financial capital is actually the least valuable of all the capitals. And we'll see this in a little bit as we look at a couple of passages. All right. So let's do this. I got some examples of how we see this capital leveraged. I want to get some interaction on this piece. So y'all can take yourselves off mute. I'd love to get some dialogue going because I want to talk. We'll have somebody read the verse, and then I want to, as a group, talk through what forms of capital do we see being expressed and invested in the whole 9 in the verse. So let's look at Matthew 13, verse 44. And whoever wants to read it can read that for me.
I'll read it.
Cool.
The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went and sold all he had, and bought that field.
Okay, cool. What is the form of capital that's being prioritized here? Of the 5.
Is it spiritual here?
Yep. Why?
Prioritizing the kingdom of heaven over, something like money or actual treasure.
Yep, absolutely. What kind of capital has to be spent in order to receive the kingdom of heaven? What in the example? What's being said?
It almost seems like he says to give, like, be willing to spend all other forms of capital for it.
Say that one more time.
To like be willing to give all other forms of capital to gain.
Yep. I would agree with you. Let's talk about the other 4 then, right? Because I agree with you on that. How is he investing financial capital in order to get spiritual capital?
Got to buy the field.
You have to buy the field, right? I got to spend money to go and buy the field. He goes and sells all that he has, right? He says, I own stuff. I have assets. I'm going to sell all of this stuff, take the proceeds, and then give all the proceeds away just for the field, right? So financial capital is being given up. What about intellectual? How is intellectual capital being spent in order to get spiritual capital?
I would say because he knew there was hidden treasure, so he bought the field.
Okay. So yeah, like just he realizes that there's hidden treasure. How can I acquire this? That takes creativity. It takes some kind of thought process, right? I know what I can do. I can go sell everything I own, take the money, and then go buy it from the owner. Like, you're just thinking, right? He's using his intellectual capital. What about physical?
He had to sell it in at a time. It doesn't specifically say like how long it took for him to sell all of his capital or everything, but um, he did it in a point where he's still living, as in, in his joy. I would imagine when you put the word joy or that verb in there, that there's some urgency when you put that in there. I mean, I don't.
Yep.
The scriptures wouldn't have to put that verb in there if there wasn't any urgency that was attached to it. So, I think he grabbed all his things that he had, knowing that there was a treasure, and immediately said, "Hey, I need to do this as quickly as possible."
Yep, absolutely. Yep, that's great, man. That's great. What about, he says he found it and then he covered it up. There's physical energy being exerted, right? I had to dig it up or however I got to it, but I had to put the dirt back so nobody else found it. That's intellectual capital and physical capital being exercised, right? What about relational? This one's a little more tricky, but look carefully at how the last sentence is worded. Let me help you. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes. He has to sell everything to people. Is that how do you say your name? NECA. NECA. Okay, cool. NECA. Got it. Yeah, absolutely. He has to sell everything to people. If you think about the process of a sale requires trust. I have to believe that what I'm gonna get in return for what I'm giving up, that somebody's not trying to get over on me. Like nobody ever went and bought something from somebody that knew they were getting over on people, right? It's like I'm gonna keep all my money in my purse and I'm gonna actually walk the other way because like I can't trust them, right? Romans 1 says that they exchanged the glory of the invisible God for created things. I think whenever a sale happens, whenever a transaction takes place, the thing that's given up is always seen as less valuable than the thing that's received. If I pay if somebody says, hey, you can have a Twix for $5, I'm like, nah, I know I can get a Twix for less than $1. If somebody says, Josh, you can have a Twix for 25 cents, I might say, give me 4. Because the value of what I'm getting is just higher, right? So when he says in his joy he goes and sells all that he has, there's relational capital being exchanged. He has to convince somebody that my assets that I have are actually valuable enough for you to spend your money on, and he has to get enough money to even total what he's going to cost him to buy the field. So he has to build all kind of relationships. I don't know how much stuff he had or how many people he had to sell it to, but there's relational transactions going on. Y'all see that?
Yeah.
The whole process of a sale is always relationship based, which here's a tip, little nugget. In the process of selling stuff, it's all about people trusting you, not the product itself, primarily. Always. All right. And we'll talk about a little bit of that later. All right. So let's look at Luke chapter 12. Luke chapter 12. I'm glad. Yeah. Excellent. Cool.
I can read it.
Yep. Cool. Thank you.
The parable of the rich fool. Can you guys hear me well?
Yep.
Someone in the crowd said to him, Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. But he said to him, Man, who made me a judge or arbitrator over you? And he said to them, Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. And he told them a parable, saying, The land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God.
Excellent. Cool. What forms of capital do we see being invested in?
Definitely the spiritual. When going in verse 21, where you talk about a guy who had so much material wealth, you go with that financial capital. Actually, it's literally what you have in like America would be like a reverse, where financial will be number one and spiritual will be the last. Where we look at a guy who has millions of dollars, maybe billions of dollars, and he can just sit back and relax on a yacht, and he didn't invest a thing into the spiritual side.
Yep. That's good. That's good. What else? What else do we see?
I think we see some intellectual capital, right? So he's like, he kind of has an issue or gets backed into a wall for what's going on with him, and he says, what am I what should I do? And he comes up with an idea. So in this case it's a negative one, but it's kind of like, here's a creative thought and something I can try in this
Absolutely.
situation.
Absolutely. Excellent. Cool. Let's move to Luke 9. Let's flip back a couple pages. If somebody want to read verses 57 to 62. I'll read it. It says, as they were going along the road, someone said to him, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said to him, foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. To another he said, follow me. But he said, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. And Jesus said to him, leave the dead to bury their own dead, but as for you, go and proclaim the kingdom of God. Yet another said, I will follow you, Lord, but let me first say farewell to those of my home. Jesus said to him, no one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God. What's the primary capital that's being sought after, or should be at least?
Spiritual.
Yep, spiritual. Okay. What other forms of capital do we see people placing as priority over spiritual capital?
Relational.
How so?
Because the guy's basically saying, I want to go and tell my family goodbye and like give my farewells and stuff.
Yep.
So he probably had a weak spot, towards his family, which is understandable, but God's like.
Yep. What else?
He put his family before God.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, and actually the second person, when he says, let me bury my own, he says, let me go and bury my father. What he's essentially saying is, let me go get my inheritance. So he actually prizes financial capital above spiritual capital. So he's like, hey, I got some money waiting on me. Let me at least just go chill at home till my dad dies. And then when he dies, I'll get some funds and I'll be back. I don't know how long that's going to be, but I'm willing to follow you. I just need the bag first. Like Jesus is like, you're not fit for me. Right. And so here's the thing. None of those, I don't think any of this stuff is bad in and of itself. It's just a matter of priority. People are making these things the priority, which is why I've got the priority here. It's not bad to want to like get your inheritance. It's not bad to want to go say farewell to your family. You just don't understand the urgency of the kingdom. Right? So, let's keep it going. I'm glad y'all are liking this. Let's go to Genesis 3. I think this is super interesting. Genesis 3, probably a story many of us have read. Somebody read verses 5, 8, and then drop down to 23 and 24. Read 4 and 5, actually.
I'll roll. So 3, 5, 4, 5. Okay. I got the NIV, by the way.
Cool.
You will not surely die, the serpent said to the woman, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be open, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. And 8. Then the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord, and he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and they hid from the Lord God among the trees of the garden. Man, what, 23, 24? Find that. So the Lord God banished him from the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which he had been taken. After he drove the man out, he placed on the east side of the Garden of Eden cherubim and a flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the way to the tree of life.
Excellent. Cool. In verse 5, what is promised to Adam and Eve?
To be like God.
Okay. And how will they be like God?
Knowing good and evil.
Okay. So what form of capital is that?
Intellectual.
Intellectual. Yep. Intellectual capital. In verse 8, it says that they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and they hid themselves. Right? What are they lacking now?
Spiritual.
Spiritual. What else?
And relational.
And relational. Right? And probably physical, because they don't get time. But they're also spending physical because they have to take the energy to go and hide.
And cover themselves.
And cover themselves. That's all. It all takes time and energy, right? So they've gained intellectual capital and had knowledge as God has it. But look at where it is on the order. You had to give up stuff that was more valuable to get it. Is that a good trade?
Nope.
Not at all, right? In verse 23 and 24, this is real bad. This is where the spiritual capital is given up, right? God kicks them out of the garden. So now the spiritual and relational capital and the physical capital have all been exchanged for intellectual capital, which is the second lowest on the pecking order. Right? So that's just one, that's one example. And let's look at Mark chapter 1. This will be the last one that we look at. And it's crazy when you understand this, you start seeing it all over the scriptures. And you just see how God puts a I'm sorry?
Oh, I was just saying, this is really cool.
Excellent. I'm glad y'all enjoying this. Y'all should get this book, Oikonomics by Mike Breen. It's really, really good. He walks through this like beautifully, and it's real short. You can probably read it in 2 to 3 hours. He wanted to secure the bag. Absolutely. So Mark 1, 16 to 21. I'm sorry, 16 to 20.
I'll read it.
Cool.
This is Charisma. Passing alongside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew, the brothers of Simon, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men." And immediately they left their nets and followed him. And going on a little farther, he saw James the son of Zebedee and John and his brother, who were in their boats mending the nets. And immediately he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired servants and followed him.
Okay, cool. What are they? What kind of capital are they looking to grow?
So
Say again.
they're trying to gain financial, I guess, eventually to sell their fish. At the moment.
So I would say they're not trying to gain financial in this instance. Well, they were when Jesus showed up.
Yeah.
When Jesus
and
showed
now
up,
they're trying to
were,
gain
right.
spiritual.
Yep. They had a business, right?
Mhm.
They have a whole business as fishermen, and so they're trying to grow financial capital. What are they investing in order to grow financial capital? Physical. Yep. I would say intellectual, because every day they have to get up and go fish. You got to put some thought process into that.
Yep.
Right, and get creative, because sometimes we see examples of times when it's like we've been out here all day and haven't caught anything. Catching fish isn't just like clockwork. You got to put some thought into like how's this gonna go today, right?
Yeah, I would say relational also.
Why?
Because they're not doing it by themselves. They're coming together to do it.
Yes.
And I also would assume that they have family back home, so there's also that regarding that and leaving their family.
Yep. Absolutely. That's great. They're trying. What are they trying to grow? By following Jesus, what are they looking to grow?
Spiritual capital.
Yeah, spiritual capital. I'm gonna make you fishers of men. And they literally get up and walk away from a whole business. Like, no questions asked. Like, we out.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what happened to the business, but they literally left the business and walked away from it just because Jesus said, let's go. They prioritize spiritual capital much more over financial capital. That's why. Great exchange. All right. So how does each form of capital grow? We saw in the beginning that the purpose of investing is to see a return. Nobody, like literally nobody, is going to give money to something that's guaranteed to like give you a negative profit, right? We never put a dollar towards it because we know we're not going to get a return. So the whole purpose of investing is to see a return. Jesus invests in us. He wants to see a return from it. So if he wants to see a return, the question is, how do we not bury our stuff in the ground and actually see the capital that he's invested into us grow? This is really important. We never try and invest at the expense of good stewardship and generosity. That's super important, right? Because somebody's going to say, shoot, I need to grow my relational capital. And in order to grow my relational capital, I'm going to stop being a good steward of some things and start partying more. And I'm going to stop being generous with my finances in some ways and start doing X, Y, and Z for the purpose of building relationships. That's never a good idea, right? God calls us to be good stewards, and he calls us to be generous to the things that you can't just like invest in order to see a return. That's still not a good return, right? Because the Christian ethic is love, and stewardship and generosity hinge on that, right? Love of God in regards to stewardship, because everything is his anyway, right? Because he gave it to us. We're just responsible for investing it. So I have to steward what he's given me. Generosity is the horizontal relationship. How do I love my neighbor and be generous in the process, right? So the purpose of investing is to see a return, never at the expense of these two things. But the purpose of growing our capital should never be just to have more capital, but to have more to share. Y'all see that? The purpose of growing capital is never, man, let me try and get my weight up spiritually so I know a bunch of stuff and I'll be a fathead theologically. That's not the point, right? The point of making a lot of money, like the bottom line for any business is, hey, listen, we got to make money if we're going to be around. I don't think that's a bad thing, right? It shouldn't be, let me just go make money for the sake of it, though. That's why Paul says, people like you love money and it's the roots of all kind of evil. And people have done crazy stuff. People have done crazy stuff loving money. But if I said, you know something, if I have more financial resources, look at the amount of people I could go and serve. And that's my driving force. That's a good thing, right? Now, I'm just the type of person I'm always like, listen, Lord, I need you to keep me on the straight and narrow when it comes to this money. Because if I go make $1 million, I think any of us, if we get in a space where we got loads of money, I think money is a temptation, or can be, right? But that's why we beg the Lord, like, God, keep me low, keep me with the right perspective. And I think that the secret to always keeping the right perspective is to always be looking to serve. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit, but look at this. I love this in Acts. Go to Acts chapter 4. I'm going to just read this so we can keep it moving because I want to get some questions in for y'all. Acts chapter 4 is a phenomenal text. And I'm going to just walk through it real quick. Acts chapter 4, verse 32 says, now the full number of those who believed were of one heart and soul, and no one said that any of the things that belonged to him was his own. Stewardship, right? But they had everything in common. And with great power, the apostles were giving their testimony to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and great grace was upon them all. There was not a needy person among them. Imagine that. There's a church, there's nobody who has a need, and everybody there doesn't consider anything that they have to be theirs, right? So there was not a needy person among them. For as many as were owners of land or houses sold them and brought the proceeds of what was sold and laid it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to each as any had need. Thus Joseph, who was also called by the apostles Barnabas, which means son of encouragement, a Levite, a native of Cyrus, sold the field that belonged to him and brought the money and laid it at the apostles' feet. I love that story. Here's why it's so good. The church at the time is young. Jesus has left. He's left the apostles with 3 years of training, and the Holy Spirit is upon them. You have a young church of people where the gospel is spreading, but they're also starting to be persecuted. It says nobody has a need. The people that God uses to make sure that everybody is straight are people who understand the importance of investments. These people had assets, right? It says, imagine if the people didn't have assets, people would have gone hungry. God has blessed people with the intellectual capital to go and buy land, go own houses, go own stuff that you can leverage as an asset. Jesus sends the Spirit of God. The Spirit of God comes down, starts indwelling men, and he starts saving individuals. And some of the individuals that he saves have assets and are these entrepreneurial, we invest in stuff, we buy stuff, we got a little money in our pocket. And he puts them in spaces with people that they would have normally not been in space with. So you have poor people in the community. You have people that didn't have access to the same stuff. He gives the people, because they have the Spirit of God, he gives them a heart to like not consider anything that they've worked so hard for as their own. They live out of this generosity, are willing to be good stewards of what God has given them. And now you have thousands of people, because in Acts 2, 3,000 people got saved in a day. You have thousands of people, and it says not one of them said, like if you would have stood in front of all these people and says, who needs something that they don't have? Everybody would have just looked at each other and said, nah, I'm good. Right? He uses the people that understand the importance of just investments and financial investments specifically, but because they understand the priority of it, they're willing to give. Y'all see the beauty of that?
Yep.
Like that, like I love that picture, just because I think that God uses the people who have the entrepreneurial spirit in really unique ways. If you read the Torah and you look at the first 5 books in the Old Testament, when God was crafting the tabernacle, it says when they were looking for people to build it, it says that, and this person had this skill because God literally gave him an ability to chisel stone in a real dope way. Like it's, I can't remember the passage, but it says that God gave him an ability and had the Spirit of God on him in a way that, man, when you chisel stone, nobody does it like you do, right? I think that God has uniquely crafted entrepreneurs and people who have this entrepreneurial spirit in a way that allows them to have the capacity to just serve a lot of people, because you just have access to resources that people don't have access to. I don't know what's going to happen with this whole pandemic and all that kind of stuff. I just know that if the day ever came where stuff went sideways and stuff tanked, I would pray, and I believe that God has given his spirit to the people in the church who would say, man, yeah, I own 5 acres over here. I own a business over here. Let me just liquidate all this stuff real quick, and we'll make sure everybody got food for the next 6 months. That's the beauty of like the gospel and what it does in the hearts of men, because it takes everything that you have and says like, this isn't mine. I'm just holding on to it for a season, because you never seen a U-Haul behind a hearse. It's not coming with me anyway. So I'm gonna just steward it for now. And when there's a need, listen, God, for whatever reason, gave me the grace to understand the importance of investing financially, but financial money is not everything. Let me go ahead and liquidate it, and y'all can just have the funds. I love it, right? So let me keep going, because I want to get some questions. So how does these form of capital grow? Each capital grows by investing what we have of the other 4. And we just saw that in the examples that we looked at, all right? Here's just some examples real quick. I'm gonna run through these. If you want to grow financial capital, one way to do it, create a business idea. What do you do next? I have to put time into building the business. What do I do next? Maybe find investors or leverage relationships. Spiritual capital, how I run my business, the wisdom that comes with that, right? Intellectual capital, purchase a class or a seminar. Y'all are here because y'all value intellectual capital, obviously, and spiritual capital. What do? You actually showed up and attended the training. You're giving your time. You're networking and sharing ideas when you meet people. And maybe I just pray for this divine insight for God to like be with me as I'm on this road to growing in my knowledge about this thing. All right. Physical capital. I think that there's a dynamic. I have it here twice because I think that God has given us, when it comes to physical, to work and rest. Right. So maybe something as simple as, this is just an example, purchase a gym membership. I care about my physical health. I need to spend the money on a gym membership. So what do? I get the gym membership, and then I go and grow my intellectual capital as well, and use just this creativity to go and do research on this thing called Google. And then I'll take somebody with me and build a relationship with them. Like to this day, one of my close friends, not a believer, my wife met his wife at the park pushing our kids on the swings together. I became tight with him. We start working out together, and literally for 3 years, we just went to the gym together every single day and got to know each other a whole lot better. That dude don't know Jesus from a brick on the wall, but we were able to build a relationship because of it. And I'm one of the few people that can talk to him about the Lord. You see what I'm saying? So we build relational capital in the process of physically working out together. Spiritual, studying the scriptures in regards to work and rest rhythms. On the rest side of things, take a day off, right? My intellectual capital, having the smarts, I struggle with this, to refrain from doing work-related tasks. That's my weakness, like to actually rest. What do? I invest my relational capital to physically rest by just recreating with family and friends. And again, spiritual, studying the different dynamics of work and rest in the scriptures. How do I grow my relational capital? Take somebody to lunch. I spend money and pay for somebody's lunch, right? Hey, let's do lunch next week. I got it. Oh, now the pressure's off of them to pay for it, so they're really willing to show up, right? What do we do while we're sitting there? We share ideas with each other. I spend time with them. Spiritual, like I pray and study the scriptures with this person potentially, right? And lastly, spiritual, purchase good books and resources. Prayer could, prayer could also be one of the physical or intellectual pieces, but to follow the framework of purchasing books, I actually read them. Then I go to a conference, and then I spend time with other Christians where we discuss potentially. These are all how you take these different forms of capital and then invest them in order to grow the one all the way to the left. All right. And I will send y'all these slides as well. So don't worry about it. I'll make sure I get y'all the slides. Here is the priority of the business economy. We're talking about kingdom economics or economics. This is how the business world functions. The bottom line is money. What do we need to get money? We need new ideas, fresh ideas. We need your ideas, We got to get this money. What do we need? We have teams. I need y'all to work together, and I need y'all to come up with a solution. You got 90 days, get it done. Well, I'm tired. I don't care if you're tired. I need you to keep showing up. And don't even talk about God while you're here. Right? I remember working at Wells Fargo, and it was like, you don't talk about God in politics. I got in trouble once for talking about that. I had, this girl was in tears. I challenged her on something. I don't know. Yeah, she was crying. I didn't know why. But it was just the fact that it's like, she hated the fact that I was pushing back on her presuppositions about who God was. But it's like, that's just something you can't do in corporate America. Like, yo, do not talk about God and politics. Leave it out. You know what I mean? They'll shut it down quick. If you work in corporate America, you might know what I'm talking about. But this is literally the hierarchy. Finances are always number one. And it's almost the exact opposite of the way God calls us to do things. All right? That's why it's important to, I think, have this framework of how does the kingdom function? Because I navigate this world, but I do it by a different set of rules. Right? And I'm not a young renegade, but I just know underneath it all, I'm not just bowing the knee to the king, because the king's not my king. The king is just in a position that God has placed him in. But when he opposes my king, I can't do that. Right? Yeah, it looks like some of y'all work in corporate America. Cool. Yeah. So what does this have to do with entrepreneurship? Entrepreneurs have a unique opportunity. I believe that, as we saw in Acts, we have the unique opportunity to create culture. I think we have an opportunity to influence culture, to set the dynamic. When you own it, you can make it whatever you want. I've had a couple interns work with me over a couple summers ago, and it was like, listen, we got Bible study in the morning, bro. You know what I mean? We get in the scriptures, and that was just part of the interview process. Like, you have a problem with that? Is that gonna be cool? You know, but you have a chance to really set the temperature, so to speak, in these different spaces. So excellent. Yeah, you can talk about the Lord. That's good. Good. I'm glad you have a work environment like that. That's cool. I think we should prioritize the right things. Having a good framework for what it looks like to understand that, man, money is not everything. It's not the end all be all. Is it important for a business to function? Absolutely. But I don't give all for us to make $1. I can always go make another $1, right? I can't get the time back that I invest. Like, even if we just talking about physical capital, like even physical capital beats out $1, you know? So just prioritizing things the right way. I think that each of us should assess the capital that we have in each category. As you think about your life and how it's structured, you may realize that's like, man, I really lack in, intellectual capital. I need to go take some classes and grow in how I'm able to think through the stuff that I want to do, or whatever it may be, right? Assess how much capital you have in each category. I would say document an individual investment strategy. Like, if it's like, man, I'm not walking with the Lord like I used to. Okay, what does it look like for you to like start spending time with Jesus more consistently, or to spend time in the community of believers, or whatever it needs to happen for you to start walking with Jesus more closely, if that's something that you need to grow in, right? I'd say document, because for me, and I think for a lot of people, until you write it down and actually put a strategy in place, it's not going to happen. Me saying I want to lose weight is not going to happen unless I actually say, you know something, I'm going to get up every day at 6 a.m. I'm going to go to the gym from 6 to 7. I'm going to come home. I'm going to shower. I'm going to go to work, and and just plan it out. That's that specifically. I've gotten to the point where I got to block off times on my calendar when I'm going to work on certain projects. Otherwise, it's like wide open, and people just try and consume my time. And I'm like, nah, I got stuff I got to do. I got to block all that stuff off, even for me. So document an individual investment strategy. How are you going to grow in the different areas that you need to grow in? And lastly, document your discipleship strategy. The goal is sharing. We're part of this oikos, this household, right? Who are the people in your sphere of influence who need you to impact them in the right ways, right? This is not about us just taking, thanks, Kayla. This is not about us just like consuming. Like, that's the problem with America. We are consumers. We always want to know what's in it for us, right? This is about like get poured into, pour back out, get poured into, pour back out. So what is the process for me actually discipling people with these frameworks and with this in mind, right? Even as an entrepreneur, that's one thing I love about it, is that as an entrepreneur, when you own a business, again, you can make it what you want. Discipleship looks super organic sometimes. I'm a real system-oriented person. It's great when I'm able to help somebody understand how to structure even their life in certain ways where you can be consistent and disciplined. Like, I might not even open the Bible, but I'm helping you have a biblical framework and biblical principles just be applied, so that when we start talking about Jesus, you know that, man, this is actually coming from a deep well. You know what I mean? So document your discipleship strategy. So how does God keep score, quote unquote? I put score in quotes because God don't really keep score, but if he did, I'd like to think it looked like this. Mark 9, verse 33 and 35 says, and they came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, what were you discussing on the way? But they kept silent, for on the way they had argued with one another about who was the greatest. And he sat down and called the 12, and he said to them, if anyone would be first, he must be last of all and servant of all. And I think that's the key. The key is to serve. Like, that's one of the things that I think the Lord has used to keep me grounded, is when you look to serve first, then you don't get enticed by all the shiny stuff. I sit in conferences and seminars all the time. I literally just Friday and Saturday, I did 10 hours each day in a conference that I was supposed to be at in person. It was 10 hours, 2 days in a row. I was like glazed over and cross-eyed, but people say stuff that's like, man, that goes so far against what the Bible calls me to. But when you have it in mind, it's like, listen, I'm here to serve. God has gifted me and given me the capital that he's given me and allowed me to be who I am in order to go and serve. If the goal is serving, then that's the win. Even if your business financially doesn't blow up, you may look back and say, man, I impacted a lot of people. I never made the amount of money that I was hoping to, but look at the trail that I was able to blaze spiritually for all the people that I engaged with. People like trust me because I do business a certain way, right? And so those are the different types of things that that I think are good. So Okay, cool. I'm just looking at y'all's comments. So cool. So serving at tons of value first. I say that all the time. If you follow me on my social media pages, I'm always talking about adding value. And people try and get you to spend $1 before they ever give you anything. I think it's important to add value first. And so that is that's the presentation on just kingdom economics or economics. I encourage everybody to get that book. I thank y'all for y'all's attentiveness. I'm open to take some questions. I know I went